Welcome, everybody. I see people coming into the room. We are so happy to have you back today. Be putting some things into the chat for you so you can get started. You'll notice the learner guide in the chat today is in a PDF form. For whatever reason, a few of the links that I put are working links, but they would not work in a PowerPoint presentation. So we have downloaded that and put it into a PDF format. And as I update, if you're someone that is enjoying using the PowerPoint version of it, I will continue to update that. And I also will continue to update this PDF link. So don't worry about needing a new link. The link that you have right now will just keep working for you. So no stress there. Hopefully your weeks have started off well. We have one more minute before we can get started. And Julia, we had so much wonderful feedback. So thank you for all that you're doing for us.
Yes, thank you. Very thrilled with the feedback. It's so helpful to see what everyone has to share. So please continue to do so.
Yes, agreed. And you will see a few of you had emailed me for the feedback form from our watch party. That's going to be in the learner guide for you. And it will say, if you haven't filled it out, you can still fill it out. I'll close that form tonight at about 5:30, but it will be open until then. So you will be able to do your feedback for that. And you'll also have a new feedback form for tonight. So we do have you fill those out each time. That's sort of your sign out for your professional learning credits for the sketches. So we also have Liberty Fetz, who was at the watch party with us. She is helping us behind the scenes here. We're so thankful for you, Liberty, for helping us out. And many of you have met her over email. So I am going to kick us off right away because we just want to get started. There's so much to talk about today, so we want to be able to jump right in with you. So hopefully you think you are in webinar 2 of our series, Reading Above the Fray, by leaning into the Essential Instructional Practices in Early Literacy and the broadcast series, Read, Write, Roar. A quick note before we even get started is that I really wanted you to be able to have enough time with Dr. Lindsey with her work. So I'm going to give a really brief overview of some things with Read, Write, Roar today. And then we're going to add a special part onto the end called Read, Write, Roar Encore. So what we'll do is for anyone that can stay on, I will stay on and do a little bit more talking with you about Read, Write, Roar. We'll have a chance to look at some of the videos that are from the show that will complement the work that Dr. Lindsey speaks about today. And this will all be recorded, that encore part. And when we do get these spliced into YouTube videos for you, we will cut the pieces up. So one will be the Read, Write, Roar Encore that will be after the webinar 2 content for our other part. So not to worry, if you can't stay on, you will not miss it. You'll have a chance to watch it again. So when we think about what we're doing here today, it is webinar 2. If you want to see the closed captions, just please select the show captions button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And the chat is disabled, but you can put questions in the Q&A and we will try and get to those today. And we do have a couple of poll questions for you as well that we will be looking into today. And everyone did really well with those last time. So we will continue to just get some more information from you. So let's, be far ahead there. Let's take a peek at our objectives for today. We will definitely be thinking more about foundational skills, the what, why, and how, and really thinking about phonemic awareness today with Reading Above the Fray. We will really be thinking about essential instructional practice number 4, because that is all linked to phonological awareness. And we will do a little bit more, like I said, digging in. You'll get some resources for Read, Write, Roar connected to the work of Dr. Lindsey. And we will, that note-taking guide that's in the learner guide for you, that note taker, you can choose that to pull that out and do some reflection. And we did have a lovely person request that for more time to either talk in a group or to be able to do some self-reflection. And our time is so short, and I know we're covering so much content that at this time we haven't built that in. Maybe we will have a little time today since we're moving some of the content to the end, but we will just encourage you to take notes so that there will be time to do that interaction. And then we also want to remind you that a piece of the reflection part that we want you to think about is really using the Padlet. So the Padlet that's out there for you, Dr. Lindsey has loaded some more information in that for us today. And that Padlet, also linked in the learner guide, is one way for you to do some of that reflecting and interacting. Not that we don't wish that you had more, but we really tried to keep this to an hour. And again, the Read, Write, Roar Encore is adding time on, but just so you get more time with Dr. Lindsey. And as far as the book update, we did send an email out Friday. I'm just going to say, if you did not receive an email, you did get one sent to you. So please check your spam or your junk folder. It might come from me, which would be aSpear@gomaisa.org, but you also might get something from Liberty Fets. So that will be LFETS@gomaisa.org. The last one you'd probably see anything from would be ELPL@gomesa.org. So just putting that out there in case you didn't get something, but you think you didn't get something, if you can just search by the subject line, because a few people that emailed me when they searched that way, they could find it. So I apologize if some of this is going into your junk, but it's how each organization's email system is set up. So many of you had requested information about the book update because you did not get the email we sent Friday. The big idea is that there was a glitch in the system. So if anyone ordered the book after March 27th, it wasn't sent out right away. So Scholastic is working really hard to get those sent out to you. We're getting tracking information like as soon as possible. And when we know they've been mailed out to the rest of you, we will send an email saying that. In the meantime, we are really grateful that Dr. Lindsey had let me know the reading forum had already put chapter 4 online, and then her editor, Ray Couteau, was so great, and he allowed us to get access to just chapter 5 in a watermarked version. So we are not to share that out. That's really just to help us because there's a glitch in the system. And we already did some of the content with Julia on chapters 1 and 2. And as we think about oral language, and we'll nest that in with vocabulary a little bit more later, but that's not going to be part of the main focus because we have a short webinar series. And that was what chapter 3 was about. So we appreciate your patience, and we are getting things to you as soon as we possibly can. So do remember that the Padlet that I'm sharing here on the screen will give you that chance to reflect any questions, and that's going to stay live. So that's not something that will change over. In other words, like that's going to stay with our group, and you'll have opportunities to keep writing into that space. So I will take a look at the hand raises and the questions in just a few minutes. I'm going to just move along so we can let Dr. Lindsey know. The last thing that you might have a question about or a raised hand, if your book had an issue, please email me if the pages were falling out. I had 3 people email me that when they opened it, the spine somehow didn't keep the pages in. So if that's you, please send me an email to aSpear@gomaisa.org. Okay, I was trying to get through all the nitty-gritty logistics fast so we can get right into content, but I know that these are things weighing on your mind, and we really appreciate that you're so attentive and conscientious and really want to be able to read the book, which we want you to be able to read too. So in the meantime, I was thinking, well, if you're really excited and have all this extra time on your hands while you're waiting for your book and you are not sure what to do with it, I'm sure you just can't wait to do more modules and professional learning, but we do have a lot of other free content for you that you could look at. And so this slide that I'm sharing with you right now, it shows that we have all these different modules on literacyessentials.org. You'll notice there's pre-K and K-3, which would probably be all of you here, they're our audience. And this in particular shows for the K-3 online modules. Last week, we learned about Essential 1. So if you want to keep digging into that, when you go to this page and you click on K-3 modules, you can select Essential 1, and then it will bring you to a professional learning place where you can get a free account with Michigan Virtual and do free learning and get sketches for that. So we will dig into a different essential today, but all the essentials from the Essentials Instructional Practices in Early Literacy document, which is again linked in your learner guide, all of those have free content with them. So if you had that extra time and you want to do some more of that learning and get some more sketch credits, here's the link again to the full document. And we've done Essential 1 and we'll look at Essential 4 today. So you have your note taker. Oh, it didn't bring over I'm going to actually just show you let's see. Let's go into our learner guide for today. Oh, which it did not bring over for me. Sorry about that. I have lots of screens open and this is what I'm looking for right now. So if you look at where your learner guide is, there's 2 pages for our learner guide today. And I set it up so that session 2 is above session 1. So here on the left, you'll see there's session 2 is up top and then session 1. And today you either have this link from last week, which would still work, or a PDF of it. But you'll have all the information here. I'll link my slide deck in later for you. That's where that sketch form is that I talked about and where you can find about the ISD map if you're not sure which county you're in. And all of these links will be in here for you that are connected to our learning. And then we do have on the second page of our resources for you some articles that we thought would be really helpful and connected to our learning today. And also some direction about where to go for webinar 3, which we'll discuss at the end. So do know that all of that's in there for you and hopefully it's easy to keep track of it in one place like that. So let's take a look now at Essential Instructional Practice 4. Here's the document that I put into the chat just a few moments ago. And again, there's our 10 essentials, not in any particular order, but we knew Essential 1 was quite important. And so today when we work with Dr. Lindsey, her chapter was on phonemic awareness. And so at our Essential 4, activities that build phonological awareness being that umbrella that's over all of the skills within that, including the most important that we want to get to is that phonemic awareness level. And so there's several things that are mentioned of what teachers can do to support children with their phonological awareness development. But when we think about today and think about what I'll be talking with you about with Read, Write, Roar, and many of the things that Dr. Lindsey will be sharing with you about would be bullets 3 and bullet 4. So bullet 3 talking about activities that involve segmenting sounds and words. And then bullet 4, activities that involve blending sounds and words. And so one of the ways that I hope to be able to support you in this work is by giving you some more resources. And so this resource here, you're seeing a mini picture, but it's on your learner guide and it says phonological awareness development. So if I were in my learner guide and I click on that, this shows how phonological awareness develops generally, but not always in a linear fashion. And so generally children are able to rhyme before they're able to do syllabication or syllables, before they do onset and rhyme, before they get to phonemes. But ultimately, phonemic awareness and the phoneme level is what we need children to get to, because it's the phoneme level that allows children to be doing blending, right? When they look at a word and they can look at each letter and then they can say, they know the sound for each letter. We talked a lot about that last week with Dr. Lindsey about how you're actually mapping all those sounds when you see a word and you know the sound and the letter correspondence for that. And then you put that together to blend it to be able to read a word. And when we're doing segmenting of sounds, what you're doing is being able to say a word like cat and then break it up like k, at, cat. And so we have to be able to do blending and segmenting in order to be able to read and write. And so my hope for you is that this chart will be something that you can use in your classroom. As I told you last week, I was a first grade teacher, and in my job, I really try and make things that I wish I had when I was an educator. And I pictured myself having this in a page protector at my table when I was reading with kids or conferring with kids, to be thinking about, I'm not sure what's going on. What kinds of questions could I ask to find out if this child's struggling in any of these areas? And so the way this will work is what's easiest to hardest going left to right, and also tasks that are easiest to hardest going from top to bottom within each category. So you will have that and you can, send questions or any comments or things that you have, but that's for your disposal as a tool for you. And hopefully you'll see that will connect on with what you're doing with Dr. Lindsey quite well. And the other piece, that I want to share with you within our learner guide would be this one here. for phonological awareness, how you play with sounds and words, and gives just some demonstrations of how you might do this with songs, poems, games, or riddles to be able to support phonological awareness. But the second page of this is really important because what it does is it says, here's what explicit instruction might look like across those areas that were on that first sheet of rhyme, syllables, onset rhyme, and phonemes. So what might explicit instruction look like? But then there's demonstration. So it's not just telling the kids the explicit instruction, but then you're showing and demonstrating that. So we hope that these tools, I had the privilege to see Dr. Tortorelli speak and then created these sheets because I felt like there would be something I would have wanted as an educator. So I hope that they are helpful to you in your practice and that they will support you. And so as we move into the day, I know I'm throwing a lot at you, but you'll have a lot of time to reflect, and hopefully the tools that I just shared with you and those resources, they'll just be something to add to your own toolkit and to connect you as Dr. Lindsey speaks. And one of the things that I just think is really sort of relevant in our field right now, we hear a lot in the coaching network and a lot of questions that come to me in my role as a coach, is the piece that has to do with phonological awareness and the connection to phonics and the connection to spelling. And so I had found that Dr. Timothy Shanahan had a blog post, and I wanted to pull out this quote for us to reflect upon, and it links right into Dr. Lindsey's book of something she wrote on page 69. And so on this quote, when Dr. Airy, who is Dr. Airy is amazing, and she gave us the whole progression of how reading develops. And so she said, rather than a line between phonological awareness and decoding, I would draw a recycling circle like a slinky by adopting a developmental perspective. And then she gives some more examples, which you'll have the blog post to read it. Phonological awareness and phonics skills and instruction are reciprocally intertwined as children acquire phonological awareness, spelling, sight word reading, and decoding skills. And so as we're learning today with Dr. Lindsey, you'll see that on this page here, she talks about phonological awareness as a red herring, possibly, when you think of it as oral only. And so she's going to get into talking with us about that connection between phonics and spelling. And so as you're listening today, I would suggest that you read the whole article, but really key into that piece that Dr. Lindsey is able to connect for us around phonological awareness and relation to spelling. And again, keep cycling back, right? And that this isn't just a one and done. And so now we are going to finally get back to Dr. Lindsey, and you'll have, again, if you want to read some more about her in the slides, I will share these out with you later, but we are excited, Julia, to get into some learning with you today around your book. We're all so excited to have you back.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Annie. I'm so excited to go ahead and get started and to talk all about phonemic awareness today. To me, this is one of the big can't miss ingredients for decoding. Phonemic awareness is so incredible, and it's so fun to think about and to realize its true power. And it's one of those things that many of us may be doing a lot of right now. We may be doing it incidentally. We may see a lot of connections to things we've done in the past and aren't really fully sure how this conversation right now has shifted and is different. So I'm hoping today that we can really dig into this concept, not just from the research, but also instructionally, so that you have some new ideas about things that you can try as soon as tomorrow, and certainly about things that you can be contemplating over time as you continue to improve your practice. So in this session today, we're going to start with the why. I always like to start here to really ground us in what are we doing here. I'm going to give you a quick recap of last time. We're going to talk about chapter 5 of Reading Above the Fray. So you can access that, as Annie said, on the learner guide, the PDF version, if you haven't received your book yet. But don't worry if you haven't read it. We are going to start at the beginning. So if you haven't read it yet, you will still be able to follow up me today. And we're going to talk about why phonemic awareness, what about phonological awareness? Then we're going to talk a lot about what does the research say around phonemic awareness instruction and what that should look like. And then I'll give some examples of this instruction as well as some key instructional swaps that we can start thinking about making now. And I do apologize if you hear any background noise. I think Zoom is pretty good at getting rid of background noises, but my dog is in here with me, and she does let herself be known quite frequently. So if you see me turning and throwing things, it's little tiny dog treats. So that's some real life for you. Okay, so a quick recap of last time that we were together. I hope that you all got a chance to watch that webinar at the watch party or at the recording if you weren't able to join us live. But just to quickly recap us and get back to kind of that baseline of understanding around what we're doing here. I talked about the simple view of reading, this idea that reading comprehension is the result of decoding times language comprehension, meaning neither of those elements can be zero in order for reading comprehension to truly work, but also really honing us in on the fact that decoding is of critical importance for children's ability to become the most powerful comprehenders of texts. And then we talked about, well, if we take a look at decoding, we look and see that there are a lot of elements that go into the ability to start decoding and encoding words. And so I showed you this graphic, which is from the book, about some of the elements of decoding being print concepts, phonemic awareness, alphabet and sound spelling knowledge, and of course, vocabulary. And that all of those come together in the act of allowing a child to decode a word, and in concert with vocabulary, allow for this orthographic mapping, this combination of pronunciation and spelling and meaning, and a long-term memory unit so that children can become fluent readers over time. So we talked about why decoding is so cool. I hope that I brought you along for the ride on that and my excitement around decoding and how this is truly the best option for supporting children in reading unknown words. And honestly, it's also the best option for you if you find yourself sometimes struggling with a new word. That is what you should be going for. And we talked about how decoding is the most reliable and most effective means for recognizing a word because a word is its written letters. And we also talked about how it leads to automatic memory for words over time. So we discussed, okay, in the moment, this is a great option. It allows us to recognize that unknown word. It also allows us to use independent knowledge of phonics and phonemic awareness in concert to recognize that word rather than relying on extraneous information. And it supports readers over time. Because after all, once we're decoding a word a few times, we're able to make that orthographic map again. We're able to become long-term fluent readers and spellers. And we discussed that we're able to create a very strong reading backbone that supports children's skill over time and their motivation over time, and means that we're giving the largest percentage of children in our classroom the highest possible chance at becoming proficient readers. So we talked all about decoding and how cool it is and the research around that. And we also talked about how one of the topics that we're really taking on together and that I take on in Reading Above the Fray is this idea that we should be teaching decoding and its elements on purpose, and that we need to be clear with ourselves and our instructional goals, our materials, and our routines and practices in knowing that we are teaching each of these elements and teaching children the act of both decoding and encoding quite purposefully. So we talked about how that generally includes explicit instruction, practice, and application. And today we're actually going to see how we can use this framework to think about phonemic awareness and also to think about how phonemic awareness fits into the larger framework of decoding and encoding. So chapter 5 in Reading Above the Fray is all about phonemic awareness. And so I just want to give you a quick overview of that chapter if you're starting to jump into it. So first you see over here, this is kind of a spiraling bubble that goes down from awareness of words all the way to awareness of phonemes. That's pointing us to this understanding that there are a lot of other things under this umbrella of phonological awareness and our ability to hear and manipulate any sound in language. And phonemic awareness is the smallest aspect of that because it is attention simply to that phoneme. And we'll talk about that more in a second. In this chapter, I get into a couple of things, and this is kind of the order in which I go. First, I start with some descriptions of phonemic awareness and phonological awareness. If you're getting caught up in some of those PH words, we start there so that we can distinguish those things. Then I talk about research on the importance of phonemic awareness, the principles of great phonemic awareness instruction, and one primary swap, which is fewer rhymes and more phonemes. So that's kind of what to expect out of the book chapter if you haven't read it yet. And what we're doing today is a complement and also an extension of that chapter. I also just wanted to remind you, as Annie already did, that this is linked up to the Michigan Literacy Essentials, particularly essential number 4, which is activities that build phonological awareness. All right, so now we're going to start with some true and false. I know that you can't chat at me, and we don't need to use the Q&A box for this, but I know some of you are in groups together right now, watching as a team, or even as a school. And some of you might be on your own, but I want you to take a second and think about each of these statements and either write it down or just think it to yourself, true or false. So first, statement number 1, phonemic awareness is more predictive of reading than phonological awareness. True or false? Statement number 2, phoneme articulation is a fad. True or false? Statement number 3, I need to purchase a publisher-created phonemic awareness curriculum. And finally, statement number 4, phonemic blending isn't as important as phonemic manipulation. Let's just take a second to think about, okay, what do I think about all of these things? Where do I fall on these 4 aspects? All right, and this is not a real quiz because I can't see your answers, so be honest with yourself about where you're at with these different aspects. All right, statement number 1 is true. Phonemic awareness is far more predictive of reading development, spelling development, and writing development than phonological awareness. Statement number 2, I would say, is false. Phonemic articulation is not just a fad. We have some research and even more emerging research about its potential for supporting children. Statement number 3 is not really true or false. It's not necessarily, depending on where you're at and what you need and what your school needs and what your students need. You don't necessarily need to turn around and purchase something tomorrow. And finally, statement number 4, phonemic blending isn't as important as phonemic manipulation is false. This is quite clear in the research, and we'll go into this a little bit more, but it's quite clear from the research that we currently have that phonemic blending and segmentation are by far the most critical components of phonemic awareness instruction. So I want you to just take a second, think about how you did, think about where you're entering. Is there some statement that you had a different answer than me, that you're curious to learn more about? And we can think about, okay, listening for that answer. Is there statements that you had the same answer as me on because you've heard it before, but you're actually not quite sure what it means? Thinking about where you could grow from here. And then I think, Annie, do we have a poll as well that we're going to do? Okay. I can't see the poll questions, but I think we had a poll on defining phonemic awareness. Is that right? Yes. Okay. We're going to go ahead and do a poll. Excuse me. This one we will be able to see, but it is anonymous.
As you're answering that, I have seen your chats about the note taker document. I don't know. Something strange is happening with my computer today. All these things that have been working are suddenly not working. So Liberty is working on that in the background. We will get that into the chat for you as soon as possible. And thank you for all of your participation right now with our poll.
Incredible. Wow. Okay. So almost everyone has answered. And we have most folks saying they're somewhat confident that they could explain the difference between phonological awareness, phonemic awareness, and phonics. Some folks saying completely confident, awesome job, and some folks saying not confident at all. That's okay. We will get you there very soon. I think everybody can see the answer to the poll now. Awesome. Fantastic. Okay. So Again, another kind of metric for thinking about where are you at, what are you hoping to learn next, and what are you most listening for. Today, one of the things that I'm going to try to do is to give you a lot of different entry points into our discussion. So you might be someone who is trying to learn about a super specific level of information and expertise, or you might be someone who's hoping to be more confident about the definitions of these terms. Either way is totally fine. And I hope that we're going to offer something for everybody. All right. Here we go. So let's start again with just some basic definitions of phonemic awareness. So to begin with, phonological awareness is an umbrella term that helps us understand what it would mean to have an awareness of language. Very broadly, it means that generally we talk about hearing and manipulating all the sounds in language from huge groupings, so like words, all the way down to rhyming units in words, and all the way down even to the phoneme. But phonological awareness is a massive category of oral awareness of our language. Phonemic awareness is a tiny subset of phonological awareness that's specific to our ability to hear and manipulate the individual phonemes in our language. So in American English, there's approximately 44 phonemes. That means there's 44 individual speech sounds that we can drill down to. So if you said the smallest speech sounds possible in American English, there would be about 44, depending on the dialect that you speak. The specific dialect that you speak. That's what phonemic awareness is. It's that ability to deal with those tiny little parts of language, the k at the beginning of cat, the t at the end of cat. That is phonemic awareness. Phonological awareness would include that, but it would also include knowing that cat and bat rhyme. It would also include knowing that cat and hamster are different words. So it includes far more than phonemic awareness. In both cases, these are oral only concepts. As you were kind of alluded to thinking about, that doesn't necessarily mean that we should think about our practice as only oral only. But the definitions of these terms and these particular things are oral only types of awareness. They are both predictive of long-term reading and writing success, and they both grow reciprocally with reading. That means that sometimes our skills in phonemic awareness might grow and then our reading skills grow, but it means the opposite as well. Sometimes our reading skills might grow, which in turn would support growth in phonemic awareness or phonological awareness. So that's an important thing to notice, because it means that sometimes what we think might, instead of giving a kid even more isolated phonemic awareness, what they might actually need is more support in reading, which will in turn support their phonemic awareness growth. But phonemic awareness matters more than phonological awareness when we're thinking about reading and spelling. First of all, because it is utterly essential for the acts of decoding and encoding words. We can't say, okay, I'm going to spell the word cat, and we cannot be successful at that task if we can't hear each individual sound and then map it to a grapheme and write it down on paper. We also cannot blend sounds in decoding if we can't hear and deal with those individual phonemes. So it is absolutely necessary for these tasks. On the other hand, you absolutely can read if you do not know how to rhyme, if you have that phonemic awareness. We do not need rhyming in order to decode or encode words. So that's another way of thinking about the difference between these types of activities. Phonemic awareness is also highly predictive of reading. It's one of the most predictive elements that we see in early children's abilities in terms of predicting their long-term success. And it is often an area of need for those who have reading disabilities. We often see that children who are older, who have challenges in reading, have what's a phonemic awareness deficit that may be supported or prevented if we are ensuring that we are more systematic and explicit in this instruction in the early years. So all of that is phonological and phonemic awareness. In turn, phonics is really the study of how do we deal with the sounds and the spellings in words. So Phonics might include some elements of phonemic awareness and phonological awareness, but it is not the same because inherently it does include letters. Oh, sorry, I went backwards there. Here we go. Now we're going forwards. Okay, when we think about phonemic awareness instruction, we're going to think about a whole myriad of research results that help us understand how we might make our instruction as high quality as possible. So I'm going to start over here. First off, we know that phonemic awareness and reading outcomes are highly predicted by good phonemic awareness instruction. This is really important because it reminds us of a few things. First, it tells us that phonemic awareness is malleable. It's a skill that we can train kids and others to be better at. It's not a skill that you just pop out of the ground with. It's a skill that we can actually have you learn and practice. Second, we see that impacting phonemic awareness tends to impact reading. If we saw research that phonemic awareness instruction impacts phonemic awareness but does not impact reading, we might be less inclined to think that phonemic awareness was really necessary for reading. And while occasionally a study will find that, generally we see that increasing a child's abilities in phonemic awareness does support their reading and spelling outcomes. So not only can we manipulate and improve phonemic awareness, but in doing so, we can manipulate and improve children's reading and spelling. Second, we know that phonemic awareness instruction is best when it's focused on blending and segmenting. This is because these, again, are the skills that are most critical for reading and writing. So we have some meta-analyses, so that's studies of many studies that came out last summer. There were 2 that came out in a month, which is kind of unheard of in terms of specific instructional outcomes. And both saw the same thing in terms of blending and segmenting, that generally those studies where researchers foregrounded blending and segmenting, or children practice blending and segmenting more, saw greater impacts, because those are the skills that we know are really quite critical for being able to decode and encode. If you aren't quite sure about the definitions of those, let me quickly pause and tell you. Blending is when we would look at a word or hear individual sounds and put them back together to say the word. You might just call it sounding out. So being able to hear d, g, and then say dog. Segmenting is the opposite, hearing the word dog and saying d, g. Next, this is maybe going to surprise some folks, but another thing that we know about phonemic awareness instruction is that it is often best if we can pair it with some articulation gestures. And I'm going to get way more into that in just a second. We also know that phonemic awareness instruction is likely to be best when it's short and intense, or short and really focused. So we see in research that generally phonemic awareness instruction needs to be maybe 5 to 10 minutes a day across K2 and as needed beyond. K1 and then as needed beyond. That is specific to what we would expect grade level expectations to be in K and 1. And that does not mean that we wouldn't have an entire class of second graders or even third graders who still need phonemic awareness instruction. But in general, if we think about what is really the most typical trajectory of development, we're thinking about phonemic awareness for everybody is really quite necessary in kindergarten and first grade. We do have some research that suggests that we don't need to be doing this all day, that it really truly is a targeted amount of time, especially if we're able to routinize children's practice so that it can be focused heavily on lots of student at-bats and practice and not tons of teacher talk. We also have research that suggests that focusing on one aspect of phonemic awareness at a time is probably the most helpful. So that goes kind of towards intensity. So if we're going to spend 5 or 10 minutes on isolating initial sounds in the fall of kindergarten, let's spend, most of that time on that. Maybe we would do a little blending if we needed to, but really thinking critically about supporting that specific skill. Next, we know that phonemic awareness instruction is best when it's paired with letters, at least a little bit. So we don't necessarily want to say we're never doing oral-only activities, but we do want to see experiences where we're matching these things together. Having phonemic awareness just in isolation and never pairing it with letters is not necessarily going to help kids understand how these skills are useful in the service of reading and writing. So last time I talked about how one of the things that we need to be sure to do when we're talking about foundational skills instruction is to be able to stop ourselves and sometimes take a step back to see the forest through the trees. So in this webinar series, we're getting really granular. We're going and we're looking at individual leaves on trees, and we're taking a microscope and we're thinking very carefully about really specific, precise elements of our foundational literacy instruction. But sometimes we have to zoom back out. An example of this at a more granular level in thinking about phonemic awareness is zooming so far in that we only do oral only practice in phonemic awareness, and we aren't zoomed out far enough to realize the only utility of phonemic awareness is if it improves children's reading and spelling. Phonemic awareness by itself, that ability to say, let's see, I've done dog and cat, rat, the ability to say rat is useless unless you are able to become a better reader and speller with it. I know I have never walked along on the street and met an adult and said, stop, I'll give you $1 million if you can tell me how many sounds are in the word kangaroo. That's not a skill that we need to help children acquire. The skill that we're helping them acquire, this phonemic awareness skill, is in the service of becoming children who are able to read and spell words. So in connecting our phonemic awareness instruction to letters, we are able to better serve that goal. And finally, we know that phonemic awareness instruction can likely proceed without rhyming instruction. We have evidence that very young children, even as young as 3, can handle phonemic awareness instruction and can learn from it. We also see some research where we're foregrounding phonemic awareness instruction early in kindergarten before it's likely that kids have had formal rhyming instruction, and they do very well. And there is some recent work in which researchers postulate, so it's not a study, it's researchers talking about how they think, where they wonder if rhyming instruction might actually impair children's access to phonemic awareness instruction and decoding and encoding, because it takes up so much of our time and it takes up so much energy, and it is not the same, it is not clear how that is supporting decoding and encoding. So even though we might need to address rhyming because of our standards, we need to make sure that in general, our instruction in dealing with sounds of language is mostly targeting phonemes. So I did say I would go into one more in depth, which is articulation. And one of the reasons why I wanted to go into this in more depth is because if you've read the book, or if you've heard me talk, or even if you've seen me on Instagram, you might be thinking, but I thought you didn't like sound walls. Why are you talking about articulation pictures and gestures? So first off, I don't like or dislike them. I don't have a personal opinion about that. That's not something that I just don't have an opinion. But the reason why I don't say, please get a sound wall tomorrow is for 3 things. Number 1, sound walls is not the same as articulation instruction. Having something on our wall is not the same thing as bringing an explicit instructional moment to our students. Second, right now, there's no research on sound walls. There might be some tomorrow. There could be some in 2 weeks. There could be new research coming out at any moment. But right now, we don't have any research that tells us for sure that it's going to impact students. So I like to focus more on practices that we really feel confident are going to impact outcomes. And one of the things that might impact outcomes that we do have some research on is giving a little bit more attention to articulation, specifically when we're doing segmenting activities. So what does the research say? Well, we have some research that focuses on using articulation or articulatory gestures to segment words. So that means those pictures that you're probably seeing all over the place of people's mouths and having kids look at themselves in the mirrors and that sort of thing. A lot of research looking at the utility of those that are the research that's outside of the SLP landscape and inside of the literacy landscape is really looking at how does that help kids segment words? Because it can be very challenging to segment words, but these looking at a mirror of ourselves and sometimes using these pictures might actually aid in spelling and decoding of beginning readers. So if you're interested in bringing this into your classroom, This is not something that I would necessarily say should be stage 1 if you've never done phonemic awareness instruction before. But if you're already doing a lot of this and you want to bring more in, or you have a sound wall and you want to figure out how to use it in a research-oriented way, some of the ways I would suggest are directly derived from research studies would be include some mirrors for kids to look at themselves as they say individual phonemes and segment those phonemes, include some pictures and give explicit instruction telling kids this picture represents this sound. Now you make that sound. Now, does your mouth feel or look, because you can look in the mirror like that picture? And then of course, link it to letters, link not just those sounds, but also even those images to pictures, and use it again in the service of potentially supporting kids in segmenting sounds. All right, now we're going to do another round of our kind of true false, but these ones, instead of true false, or it's going to be what comes first. So thinking now more about our practice and our instruction, thinking first, what comes first and then what comes next. So you can answer these in different ways. You could say neither comes first or next. You could say, yes, this is the right order, or you could say, no, it needs to be the opposite order. All right, so our first one. First, phonemic awareness and isolation, then letters and learning to read. Is that in the right order, not in the right order, or they need to be done simultaneously? Number 2, first rhyming, then phonemic awareness. Number 3, first isolating sounds, then blending and segmenting. And number 4, first 2 sounds as words and syllables or parts, then 3 sound words. All right, let's take a look at the answers again, thinking about where you had a different thought than I did and where you had similar thoughts. All right. First, phonemic awareness and isolation, then letters and learning to read. Nope, do them both simultaneously. The current research would certainly suggest that we need to intertwine these activities and that they will reciprocally support each other. There is no current evidence that children need to reach a threshold of phonemic awareness mastery before they are able to read and spell. There is no evidence that kids need to reach a certain threshold before we can ask them to start reading and spelling. So that means that we shouldn't be waiting until they get phonemic awareness in order to start alphabet learning, in order to start CVC word reading. We can do all of these things in a simultaneous way. Number 2, first rhyming, then phonemic awareness. Nope, hopefully you got that one because we just talked about it. Emphasize that phonemic awareness all along, even if you're in PK or developmental kindergarten, young fives, whatever you call that time of year. First, isolating sounds, then blending and segmenting. Yes, this one does likely make the most sense. We do know that there is a broad spectrum of phonemic awareness development, and it is probably going to be best to do some isolated sound work, especially in kindergarten. And then finally, first 2 sounds as words and syllables or parts, and then 3 sound words. Yes, likely best. We don't need to hop straight into CVC word blending and segmenting, and we'll get more into this one in particular. Before we move on into thinking more about our practice and instructional moves, we have one more poll where we're going to ask you to reflect on what does phonemic awareness instruction look like in your classroom.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Thank you. Yeah, people are still with us, Julia. This is a good sign. People are listening to the call.
Good. All right. We're seeing almost everybody has responded so far, 82% of people, and most people are hinting that they have a curricular resource that they implement every single day, or they teach it explicitly with their own research resources, or they teach it during phonics. So let's go ahead and end the poll and see. All right, so for so many of you who have a curricular resource or you have some of your own resources, I'm hoping that as we move into this next section, you could start thinking about a couple things. The first would be thinking about what can I reflect on in terms of my resource that is or isn't as aligned with what research I'm sharing, and what might I do to tweak that experience. You might also be reflecting on, if you are using a curricular resource, what are the aspects of that resource that you want to be sure that you do not skip? When I was teaching, I know that I almost always skipped the dictation part of my phonics lessons because I did not understand the purpose of that experience in phonics because nobody ever explained it to me. So thinking about what are aspects of your curricular resource that you definitely don't want to skip. If you are teaching it with your own resources or you're teaching it embedded in a phonics program, thinking about what additional activities or routines you can infuse into that experience. And if you don't teach it at all, I hope you come away with an idea about something that you could try tomorrow. It doesn't have to be perfect, to think about how you could start infusing this into your day. All right. So again, just to quickly remind you, Annie already shared this, but I just wanted to share kind of some of this again. There are some broad strokes, phonemic awareness, developmental milestones that we can think about, but we, again, don't necessarily have evidence that we need to be putting up gates in between these. What I mean by that is we don't need to say, if you cannot isolate sounds, then I'm going to put you in a gated area by yourself, and you're only going to work on isolating sounds, and I'm never going to have you experience blending or segmenting or anything else. And I'm not going to give you letters. We're just going to isolate sounds all day. There's no evidence that we need to be doing that. There is likely some level of fluidity in this development. Some children might kind of move in a reasonable stair-step way. Some kids might move through everything with certain sounds and then be way back at the beginning for other sounds. So knowing that this is kind of the broad strokes of how this develops and the broad strokes of how we might want to think about our instruction, but it's not so specific that we need to be tying up to this and not feel like we have the ability to support kids in moving beyond a certain skill if they still aren't showing full mastery. Oh my goodness, I'm going backwards again. Okay. All right, here we go, forwards. So in general, what does phonemic awareness need to look like? First things first, we should start with continuous sounds. If we're thinking about how should my phonemic awareness instruction look over time, we should always be beginning with continuous sounds. We can hold these sounds. We never have to add that schwa like we might hear with b and ba. So we never get confused by that additional sound that we sometimes add and children often add to the end of stop consonants. And we actually do have some research that's starting with continuous sounds, not just in isolation, but moving those continuous sounds all the way into blending and segmenting may support children's abilities in blending, segmenting, decoding, and encoding. So we should always start with continuous sounds. This might be most obvious in kindergarten, but I would also suggest that if you are working with older children, first grade and beyond, and or if you are seeing children struggle, think about if you have ever asked them to work solely with continuous sounds. Take a step back, maybe just for a week, and see what happens if those children are given more exposure to working with continuous sounds and to not having to deal with, again, that schwa, and to being able to hold the sounds into one another. Second, generally our instruction should be focused on blending and segmenting. Blending and segmenting are by far the most critical, again, for decoding and encoding. That should hopefully be obvious to you why. It's because blending is just decoding without letters and segmenting is just encoding without letters, or the opposite is also true. So when we're thinking about how we want to support our students, we want to think about across our year, most of the time that we're spending in phonemic awareness instruction should be focused on blending and segmenting. We also know from research that kids can start blending sounds together and then decoding a lot earlier than you think that they can. So instead of waiting until the end of the alphabet, thinking about children can start blending phonemes together after they know just a few phonemes. We see this in curricula like the UFLI Foundations curriculum, which is really new. And in that curriculum, they have kids blending and segmenting after like 2 or maybe 3 letters and sounds. In research, we have clear evidence that after about 13 letters and sounds, children can definitely be blending, segmenting, decoding, and encoding. Why is there that gap? Because I'm not aware of anyone who has investigated the exact number of letters needed, but we definitely have research where children knew, again, as few as 13 letter sound relationships where they were clearly able to start doing these tasks with great benefit to their long-term reading. And finally, in general, our instruction needs to have letters. Don't do phonemic awareness all by itself. Connect it to letters and specifically to your phonics instruction to help children use this for reading and spelling. So if you're in a situation where you're using a phonemic awareness curriculum that is completely separated from your phonics curriculum, you need to make sure that you do eventually interweave those. All right. So what about 2-sound blending? I said, don't start with 3-sound blending. You can go ahead and start with 2. This is also a great tip for children who are struggling, which this comes from several research studies in which researchers taught kids to blend, segment, decode, and encode, starting with CV syllables. So B-A, ba, that sort of thing. This acknowledges that many kids find it really hard to go from find the first sound, find the last sound, now let's blend 3 sounds. And knowing that we can start with this CV pattern and it will be really helpful. We can also especially start with continuous sounds and we can add even more bang for our buck here. Generally, I don't like nonsense words, but in this case, there's a really specific reason to use this. And we have quite a bit of research where researchers did this and we saw benefit to children's, again, decoding and encoding beyond just these CV syllable types. So I would consider this as something to definitely try. I'm calling them syllables, not nonsense words, but you can call them whatever you want. If kids are struggling even more, a few things that I would suggest. The first is the obvious one, more time, more practice. Don't think about hundreds of at-bats, think about thousands. The second is to make sure you're not overdoing it. Don't forget that reciprocal relationship. And the third is to add supports like articulatory gestures, sound boxes, or go backwards to easier skills. And now in our last few minutes, we're going to get into our instructional swaps. And we're again going to be thinking about how these can fit into these examples where we have children doing where they're learning explicitly, they're practicing in isolation, and then they are having application. And we are drawing that application even into our language when kids are in texts. This is an example of a scope and sequence that you might use. I'm going to kind of run straight through this, but we'll put this actually up on the Padlet if you need to see it. There's also some assessments up on the Padlet if you need them that are free. This again is just an example lesson. I'm going to put it up on the Padlet. If you have never taught phonemic awareness, you could try this tomorrow. Okay, but getting into some examples of things that we can be adding into our classroom. First, try successive blending. This is one way that we can make sure we're not breaking the speech sound and also can potentially support children with working memory challenges. Instead of saying, listen to this word and say every sound, at, we're going to bundle things. So we can say at, sat, and we are bundling our blending in that way so that we are able to hold on to things a little bit easier. And again, we're not getting in the way of that schwa. Our next example routine, and this is both of these are in the book, by the way, is sound boxes, which have been researched in several small studies and have really supported children's phonemic awareness and decoding. In this procedure, you need to make sure that if you're having kids use a sound box and they're using even tokens, have them repeat the word before they start blending or segmenting that word using the sound box. A lot of times we skip this. We say, okay, the word is cat, put a token for every sounding cat. and then kids don't even say the word before they get going. Have kids repeat the word. In every single research study, that is a feature of the study, is always having kids repeat the word so that they're really thinking and ready to say every single sound. And then move the chips as you say them in each box and blend them together. You can also add tiles, letter tiles, or handwriting. Now, if you do have bilingual learners, I want to add a few considerations. These are very baseline considerations, not end of the line considerations. So I know that this doesn't necessarily feel like enough, but it's just a few things to start you thinking about this. The first is try to use real words as much as possible, even in phonemic awareness instruction, and make it really clear when you're just talking about basically combined sounds. So if you're doing something weird, like you're saying, okay, we're gonna blend together si, that's not a word. Let's make it very clear for bilingual children, multilingual children, that we're not talking about a word here, so that they're not using a lot of cognitive energy to try to understand what's happening in the language. Second, learn about the children's home language. Languages operate differently. Not all languages are based in phonemes. So knowing that, understanding that, what language children came from, and try to learn about how that language operates, even just a tiny bit, can help you understand what strengths they may be bringing into English. If children do come from another language that does operate with phonemes, then they are likely can leverage those skills into English, again, if you know what they are and if you are able to kind of highlight them with children. Oh, golly. Okay. And finally, so what are you going to try tomorrow? I know I just threw a ton of information at you, but hopefully you learned something new about phonemic awareness, the research on phonemic awareness, and some of the instructional moves that we can make. I understand I flew through the last part a little bit faster than I wanted to. So again, we will have those resources on the Padlet for you so that you can continue to try them out. But I want you to take a look and just think about, where do you fit into this? What might you be working on swapping out even tomorrow? And finally, if you want to tell me about that thing that you try to swap out, I would love to hear about it. If you have a question about what you're swapping out, I would also love to hear that. And I'm going to turn it over to Annie now for just our very last minute.
Thanks, Julia. So much information. I think people will be happy to know that you are doing, that the swaps that you talked about will be posted in the Padlet, like the process for those. So if you missed those, you will have access to that. So we don't have access to slides, but we do have access to the Padlet, and Dr. Lindsey's posting a lot of things in there for us. So prior to, I was going to do a little bit on Read, Write, Roar for everyone, but what I want to do is make sure that you all know preparing for the next time, and I want to give you the feedback form for today. And so there are some things to prepare for webinar 3. Now, I know that many of you still don't have the book. I don't have the shipping information for that. I promise I will email you all as soon as I have it. So you will get an email once I know that they've been shipped with an approximate date of their arrival for you. So in the meantime, if you want to read 4 and 5, you can do that and participate in the Padlet in that way. And it's 2 more weeks until our next webinar. So my hope is that you'll have those books by next Monday, and that will give you at least a week to read chapter 6. But in the meantime, you can look at essential instructional practices 4 and 5 and 6 to prepare for webinar 3 next time. And please do engage in the Padlet and take a look at that learner guide to figure out ways that you can continue to get access to things. And so I'm going to link our feedback form into the chat for you right now. Oh, nope, I don't want to do that. So many things to do at once. This is it's been a technology day. Someone made me feel better. They said none of their links are working and that Google Docs might be down. So that's sadly making me feel a bit better, because nothing is working for me on my end. So there is our feedback form. And I wish I knew someone at Google to tell them that they cannot have an outage during our webinar series when we need you to be able to get into things. Thanks for your patience. And for those of you who are able to stay on with me, I'll be really excited to share some with you about Read, Write, Roar. So we will launch into that right now. And Dr. Lindsey, there are a few questions in the Q&A. So we can pull those into the Padlet if that's helpful, like for the other questions, and maybe responses in there. Would that be helpful? Okay, So if you put a question that's specifically for Julia in the Q&A, we'll pull them into the Padlet, and so that we can have the interaction there with her. And thank you for doing that for us, Julia. It makes a really big difference for us to be able to have that as a resource ongoing. So, and okay, so for Read, Write, Roar, let me share with you a little bit about this. And so this is our encore part of our presentation for you today. And hopefully you will find this helpful and useful for what you could be doing in your classroom. So last time we did talk briefly that Read, Write, Roar is a broadcast literacy program that was created by Michigan educators with support from Michigan literacy coaches, and that the lessons on this literacy show are aligned to the essential instructional practices in early literacy as well as state standards. So my goal for us in this room together, in this space together, is to think about how we might utilize these in our classrooms. Like, what could you take from these? So maybe it's that you want to try doing something like a word ladder, which we're going to discuss, but you're just really not sure how to get started and what to do. And so you might be able to just watch a video of someone like Mrs. Skelly, Haley Skelly teaching one and see hers, or watch one of me teaching one, or watch one of Tracy Zari King doing one. And then you'd have a model of a teacher to look to. You'll notice in these that we start with an oral part, and then we add the letters and the sounds. So wanting you to know that we do try and think about that spiral piece that was mentioned, the slinky with Dr. Aries' quote, and then that Dr. Lindsey spoke about this whole time, that we're not just like stopping and waiting before moving on to the next part. We're cycling through these things to develop these skills simultaneously in a reciprocal manner for children. And so we hope that you'll see these episodes as a possible resource to support and show the reciprocity between phonemic awareness, phonics, and spelling. And certainly they can be a tool for you to share with families to be able to use with their children at home, or for a paraprofessional in your classroom, or maybe you have volunteers and they're not sure what to do. The whole goal with this program is that children would need anything to write with and anything to write on, whether that's paper from your recycling bin and a broken crayon. They should be able to participate in the lessons that we do on the show. So one of the things I wanted to share with you, my slides I got all ahead of my slides because right here. I pulled out where the connections are between the word letters lessons we'll take a look at and the things we spoke about today with Dr. Lindsey. So skills that are in this would be segmenting, blending, phoneme substitution, phoneme deletion, and phoneme insertion, meaning that there's parts within all of this where it's just one phoneme that we're switching out and putting in another one, or we're adding a phoneme, or we're taking it away a phoneme. And you'll be seeing that in the lessons that we talk about. Oh, thank you, Liberty. I see that you're helping me, and something happened with the form. So thank you, Liberty, for that help. So also on this side, we wanted to just show you how there's connections to the Michigan ELA standards. And so if you see RF, that stands for Reading Foundational Standard, and K would be the grade level. Number 1 would be the first standard within that reading foundational skill for kindergarten, and A would be a sub bullet of that. So that's how these read, and it shows the different grade levels and the parts and pieces where you would see these pieces being connected. So I'm going to zoom out of this one for a minute and wanted to just show you a little bit about how you can access Read, Write, Roar online here. So if you're in the Michigan Learning Channel, there is now just a page that is for Read, Write, Roar. And you can look for different subjects, but this page that I brought us to right now is just the Read, Write, Roar page. And so it has all different links. You can look at the lessons, it has the activities and the printables, and it also has who the teachers are on the show. And so there's a little bit of an overview here, it gives a little teaser for it. And then down here at the bottom, something we're working on right now that Janice Miller from Van Buren ISD and Dr. Rhonda Provost, who has been supporting this project, they're wrapping up all the work that we had put in at the grade levels and getting them into a nice tight fashion to be able to share out with you. So you'll have kind of like a pacing learning guide for each of the grade levels. But for when you see the word season 1 or season 2, it's because it's a show. So that's how they're thinking of these in terms of, like, we did the first group of episodes starting at 1 and it goes up to like 10, there's 10 episodes, right? So you're going to see that it's like 101 through 110 would be the episodes. And so that's why it says season 1, but we did these by a theme. And the themes are connected to science and social studies. There are expectations from the social studies standards for the state of Michigan and the science standards for the state of Michigan. So we try and really make this an example for you to see how you might start to include. Now, this does not take the place of social studies and science content area teaching. This is more of like, here's a way that you can dovetail what you're doing in literacy with what you need to teach in science or in social studies to show the connection for kids, and how what we're doing as readers and writers is also going to be important when we're thinking about science or when we're thinking about social studies. And so you can see that there are different themes throughout the seasons. And for one of the things that I'm going to show you today, and I shared in the learner guide, was from season 2. Our theme was Earth's place in space, and we had consonant blends as one of the big foundational skills that we worked on in that part. And so I will be able to show you that in a few minutes, but we have this for all the way from kindergarten through grade 3. So I encourage you to check out this page and you can see what they have here. And there's activity books that you can also find out about that are for the summer. So I just wanted to show you that page. And then, as I said, that there are different lessons. And so for today, I put together, now I'm just going to cross my fingers, everybody, because there's been an issue, as you all know, with Google Forms being able to let you make a copy. But I did create a Google form right here where you could jot down any new learning that you have as you watch the kindergarten lesson or the first grade lesson, ideas you might want to try for kindergarten or first grade, or questions that you might have, or any additional notes. So I will share that with you. And you're seeing it says anyone with the link can be an editor, but we'll just see if that actually happens. And I'll cross my fingers right now that this is going to work for us. So if one of you is able to actually make it work, would you just put that in the chat for me so I know that it's allowing you to make a copy of the form? And now let's take a peek. So we're going to start with, where did Mrs. Skelly's go? Okay, I see some people on the page, so that's exciting. I think that means that many of you are actually able to get into it, which I'm pretty thrilled about. All right, let's pull Mrs. Skelly's video over. This is a kindergarten lesson that's being taught. Pull this over here, and let's watch Mrs. Skelly. Make sure I'm going to stop sharing for just a moment so that I make sure you can see and hear what's happening. Okay.
Today, we're going to build a word ladder. We're going to start at the bottom, and then we're going to one letter in the word. Just like a ladder, we're going to start at the bottom and make our way all the way to the top. Make sure you have something to write with so you can write with us. The first word we're going to write is the word cup. I like to drink milk from a cup. Let's listen for the sounds in the word cup. Cup. Let's write that word at the bottom of our ladder. Cup. I like to take my finger and check to make sure I spelled it the right way. Cup. Good. Okay, now we're going to change one letter in the word cup to make the word pup. My pup was so cute when she was little. Pup. Let's look and listen to the sounds and figure out what letter we need to change to turn cup into pup. Pup. What letter do we need to change? That's right. We need to change the beginning sound of the word cup. We need to take away the C and add a P. Let's write the word pup. Take your finger and check it. Pup. Good. Okay, now we're going to change one letter in the word pup to make the word pop. I like to pop my bubble gum. Pop. Let's listen for the sounds. Ah. Pop. What letter do we need to change to turn pup into pop? That's right. We need to change the middle sound. Ah. We need to take out the U and make it into an O. Let's write it down. Say the sounds as you write it. Ah. Let's take our finger and check it. Ah. Pop. Very good. Okay, now we're going to change the word pop into pot. I use a pot to cook my rice. Pot. Let's listen for the sounds in the word pot.
Oh boy. We're having one of those days, everybody. I don't know. Let's see. It looks like it wants to play, Haley, but it's not. Okay. Well, let me just refresh the page really quickly. And let's see. Thank you for your patience today. It's always something. So I really appreciate how you're all hanging in there and that so many of you stayed on with me. So let's try. I think we're about here. See if it'll work.
Ah. Pot. What letter do we need to change to turn pop into pot? That's right. We need to change the ending sound. We need to take out the P and add in a T. Let's write it down. Listen to the sounds as you write down the word pot. Ah. Take your finger and check it. Ah. Pot. Wow, you're doing great. Okay, now we're going to change the word pot into the word pat. My dog loves it when I pat her on the head. Pat. Let's listen to the sounds. Pat. Pat. What letter do we need to change to turn pot into pat? That's right. We need to change the middle sound. We need to take out that O and add in an A. Great. Let's write it down. Don't forget to say the sounds as you write it. At. Take your finger and check the sounds. At. Pat. Great. Now we're going to change the word pat into pan. I love to make pancakes in a pan. Yum. That makes me hungry. Let's listen to the sounds in the word pan. An. Pan. What letter do I need to change to turn pat into pan? That's right. We need to change the ending sound. We need to take out the T and add in an N. Go ahead and write it down. Don't forget to say the sounds as you write the word pan. An. Pan. Great. We've got one more word to get to the top of our ladder. The last word we're going to make is we're going to change the word pan into the word man. The man was really nice. Man. Let's listen to the sounds. An. Man. What letter do you think we need to change to turn pan into man? That's right. We have to take out the P and add in an M. Very good. Let's write down the word man. Don't forget to say the sounds as you write it down. Man. Take your finger and check it. Man. We just wrote the word man. Now pay special attention to this word because it's going to come up later when we read a nursery rhyme. You did an amazing job writing all the words on our word ladder today.
Okay, so I love Mrs. Skelly, love her energy and love how clear she is. I should let you know that this particular lesson that we looked at for kindergarten probably seems very ambitious if you're thinking about the beginning of the year. This lesson would have been done toward the end of the year, about this time of year in kindergarten. So if that's helpful and inspiring to any of you who are thinking, oh, maybe I could try something like this, even on a smaller scale with your students, that we hope that that would be helpful. I will now show you, Tony's Zoom's open on, or tabs open on here. So this one here is going to be a clip from first grade. This one's a little bit more robust because it's a little bit for older kids, but it's connected to what we were doing when we had been working on particular blends that were part of our first grade scope and sequence. So we won't watch the whole thing, but we'll watch some aspects of it. And I hope that you enjoy it. Let's see. Oh, I had all these things queued up before, but it's from that day.
Hey there, learners. It's Mrs. Spear again. Welcome back. Today, we are going to be word builders. We will use what we know about sounds and letters to change words. So we're going to do a word ladder today. This is going to be our word ladder. And just like a regular ladder that you start at the bottom and climb up, we will start here at the bottom and climb up to the top, starting with one word, using what we know about letters and sounds to change one or two of them at a time, and then keep building words until we get to the very top. So my trusty tools for this job is going to be my pointer, and I have a marker. You'll want something to write with and something to write on. Let's get word building. Okay, so let's get started with our word ladder. The very first word that we're going to do today is the word had. I had a banana with my breakfast. Had. Can you say had? Excellent. Now let's listen for the sounds in had. Ready? D, had. Let's think about what we know about letters and sounds to write the letters that we hear in had. Ready? Here we go. We're matching letters to the sounds we hear in had, and we're going to say the sounds as we write the letters. Had. D. Had. Now we are going to point and check to make sure that we have the right sounds. Here we go. D. Had. Well done. We just spelled had. Well, now we're going to change one letter so that we can change the word had into the word hand. This is my right hand. Can you say hand? Excellent. Now, our next job is to listen and say the sounds that we hear in the word hand. Ready? Let's listen and say hand. D. Did you hear those sounds? Great. Well, now we're going to look at had and think, how do we change d into d? sound do you hear that we need to add? Yes, we need to add a N. What letter makes the N sound? You've got it, letter N. So now we need to decide, where does the N go to change from had to hand? Yes, that's right. We're going to add an N between the A and the D. Let's say the sounds as we write them to write hand. Here we go. A, N, D. Hand. And now we will point and check to make sure that we have the right sounds and the right letters. Here we go. A, N, D. Hand. Well done. Hey, did you notice we've been learning about the "nd" blend at the end of words? And there it is, right in the word hand. Well, now we're going to do another word. Keep climbing up our ladder. The next word is sand. Can you say sand? Excellent. I love to put my feet in the sand at the beach. Sand. Let's listen and say the sounds in sand. Here we go. S, A, N, D. Sand. Did you hear those sounds? Now let's look at hand and think, how will we change A, N, D into S, A, N, D? What letter do we need to change? Just one letter.
Okay, so I think you have the big idea of the things that you can do with a word ladder lesson. And again, you can match this to whatever it is that you're working on for your phonics skills, and wherever the children are in your classroom for the support that they need, you can design your lesson. Like I made up all of these lessons based on what we were teaching in our other phonics direct instruction. So I took what we were working on of ending blends and beginning blends we had already taught. So this word ladder goes through the ending and beginning blends that we had been working on. So that's what's kind of fun about this, is the autonomy that as a teacher you get to have with this, but really making those connections. So you'll notice that I did say, just like we've been working on the ending blends, kids won't make those connections. We really have to be explicit and help them see that what we're doing in one part of the day is actually connected to the rest of the part of the day. So you can just bring that up, even if it's in math and you're doing a story problem and there's a word that has an ND in it. That's a great time for you to just point that out to kids. Wow, look it, we've been working on the ND sound, and look, there it is right there in that word sand. The construction workers were pouring sand into the sandbox. So anyhow, that's something that I hope will be helpful. And what I did in our learner guide for you was on this page here. Let's see, where did my Zoom go? So on our learner guide here, down with the Michigan Learning Channel links, there's a word ladder video for 213 for grade 1, but then there's an activity guide. So what I did was sort of give you just the activity guides for the lessons on Read Write Roar. Often they might not be a whole page like this. So I wanted you to see an example so you'd have one to look at to use for yourself. And so this walks through and does exactly what I do in lesson 213 if you wanted to try it out. And if you have children in your class that you think that this would be something to support them with their learning, you could play that video for episode 213. The link is in the learner guide, and you could use this sheet where we start with the word wind and we work all the way up our ladder. And we're again working on in this one some other blends that we were doing at that time. So I hope that as we've gone through our work and our time together today, you've really had a moment to think about how all the work that you're doing in your classroom is actually connected with the work that Dr. Lindsey talked about. And it really doesn't matter. I mean, some of you mentioned that you don't teach phonological awareness. Well, if you're in an older grade, it's, the guidance is as needed thereafter. So there may be one or two students in your classroom that you're noticing are struggling, and you would notice them with this when they're trying to read multisyllabic words and they're having a hard time segmenting and blending. You would notice this in their spelling and how they're writing words, that they're missing big chunks in their words. And so thinking about what you know from Dr. Lindsey, looking at that chart that's linked in the learner guide, that's the phonological awareness progression, and kind of seeing, where's the student having some struggle, and what do I need to do to support this child to be able to have some more skills moving forward? Especially we're seeing and hearing a lot from people that a lot of the children who are in the older grades due to the pandemic are really, we're finding some holes in their abilities, and some of them are in their phonological awareness, or specifically phonemic awareness ability to be flexible and do things like segment and blend or insert and delete other sounds. So really hope that you've had a lovely time in our webinar today. Appreciate all of you that stayed on. There's so many of you that continued to stay on with us, and I hope that this gave you a glimpse of the kinds of things that Read, Write, Roar might be able to support for you in your practice. And as we close out, I'll stay on for a couple of more minutes. I'm going to just share with you, we have some teasers here. I put together a loop of all of the different teachers kind of talking about what they were doing in their lessons. We did some promos. So I will rewind this again. If anything wants to work with me today, I'll be really happy. And we'll rewind this, start at the beginning and play us out. So I'm wishing you a really excellent afternoon. You will get an email the Friday before we have any of our webinars. You will be getting an email from me. If you don't get one, please check your junk folder. And if you're not getting emails, it might mean that you're not actually registered in the system with us for whatever reason. So if someone just gave you a link, or you only put in for the book access, then you're probably not in the actual system that's sending these out. So please get in touch if you think this might be you. Thank you for everything. I will put the reflection forum in the chat one more time. So please do give us your feedback today. And thanks for your dedication that you've given to all of the kids that you serve where you are. And here's some fun Read, Write, Roar to play us out today.
In kindergarten, on Read, Write, Roar, we're exploring what it means to be in a community, while also learning more high-frequency words and these letters of the alphabet, including their names, sounds, and how to write them. We'll also look at the different people in a community who provide goods and services, and think about what we can do to be active citizens. Watch Read, Write, Roar every day on the hour from 8 a.m. to noon and 4 to 6 p.m. In kindergarten, on Read, Write, Roar, we'll listen to read-alouds to keep exploring what it means to be a member of a community. Plus, we'll ask ourselves what we can do to be leaders in our own communities. We'll also learn more high-frequency words and these letters of the alphabet, including their names, sounds, and how to write them. Watch Read, Write, Roar every day on the hour from 8 a.m. to noon and 4 to 6 p.m.
In kindergarten, on Read, Write, Roar, we'll identify high-frequency words and stories in nursery rhymes. We'll also practice understanding the themes of what we read by drawing pictures and writing sentences that summarize what the story is about. Learn all of this and more on Read, Write, Roar. Watch every day on the hour from 8 a.m. to noon and 4 to 6 p.m.
In first grade on Read, Write, Roar, we're exploring the role we all play as citizens in shaping our communities. Join us for some out and about segments to places where community helpers serve us. Plus, learn about the ED and ING endings and discover how different endings can change the tense of a word. Learn all this and more on Read, Write, Roar. Watch every day on the hour from 8 a.m. to noon and 4 to 6 p.m.
In first grade on Read, Write, Roar, we'll keep learning about communities, citizenship, and rules with a focus on how we can work together to solve problems. Plus, we'll walk through the process to write interview questions and see some of the amazing things libraries have to offer. Don't miss it. Watch Read, Write, Roar every day on the hour from 8 a.m. to noon and 4 to 6 p.m. In first grade on Read, Write, Roar, we'll consider what it means to be a good friend as we read some special stories. We'll learn our controlled vowel sounds and about words ending with a silent E, and use this new learning to solve mystery words and sort words. You don't want to miss it. Watch Read, Write, Roar every day on the hour from 8 a.m. to noon and 4 to 6 p.m.
In second grade, on Read, Write, Roar, we'll practice reading and writing words with multiple syllables. We'll also learn about different ways to study the past, including how to use historic artifacts. Learn all this and more on Read, Write, Roar. Watch every day on the hour from 8 a.m. to noon and 4 to 6 p.m. In second grade, on Read, Write, Roar, we'll look at what can be learned by studying people and events from the past. We'll also work on reading and writing words with the ED ending. Join us for fun lessons on Read, Write, Roar. Watch every day on the hour from 8 a.m. to noon and 4 to 6 p.m. In second grade, on Read, Write, Roar, we'll use poetry and opinion writing to help us better understand how small acts can show empathy and kindness. Plus, we'll explore words with these prefixes and suffixes. Don't miss it. Watch Read, Write, Roar every day on the hour from 8 a.m. to noon and 4 to 6 p.m.
In third grade on Read, Write, Roar, we're reading and writing biographies to explore the impact that a single person can have on history. Plus, we'll learn about different syllable types and our controlled vowel patterns, and use that learning in word sorts and to solve mystery words. Watch Read, Write, Roar every day on the hour from 8 a.m. to noon and 4 to 6 p.m.
In third grade on Read, Write, Roar, we'll continue to read and write biographies. Plus, we'll work on comparing and contrasting books and finding themes across text. We'll also work on applying what we know about syllable types to discover mystery words. All this and more is happening on Read, Write, Roar. Watch every day on the hour from 8 a.m. to noon and 4 to 6 p.m.
Okay, everybody, I hope you have a great night, and we'll see you for our next webinar on May 1st. Take care and have a really wonderful evening, and I hope it warms up where you are.